Victoria Hale never thought death would come in her own luxury car, cold, dark, sinking slowly to the river bottom. Water poured through the door seals as she frantically yanked the handle, her lungs burning, her vision fading. But then a hand, strong, calloused, completely unfamiliar, pulled her from the darkness. The man who saved her life wasn't a CEO, wasn't a powerful lawyer. He was just a single father living in rural Kansas, the same man she'd screamed at on the road just one day before. And now she owed him everything. Follow this story to the end, hit like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The sun hung low over the Kansas horizon, painting the endless wheat fields in shades of amber and rust. Ethan Carter's truck rumbled down the narrow country road, windows down, radio playing something old and familiar. In the back seat, Mia hummed along, her small fingers tracing patterns on the dusty glass. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" she asked, her voice bright with hope. Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror, catching the gap-toothed grin that always managed to undo him. "We'll see, kiddo, maybe after we pick up the feed." "You always say we'll see," Mia said, crossing her arms in mock frustration. "That means no." "It means maybe," Ethan corrected, fighting a smile. "Big difference." The road stretched ahead, empty except for the occasional farmhouse tucked behind rows of corn. This was home. Quiet. Predictable. Safe. Ethan had grown up here, married here, buried his wife here. And now he was raising Mia here, in the same house where he'd learned to walk, the same fields where he'd learned to drive. He wasn't rich. Hell, most months he barely scraped by. But Mia had everything she needed: a roof, food, love. That was enough. It had to be. Ethan slowed as he approached the intersection near Miller's Creek. The stop sign was half hidden behind overgrown bushes, the paint faded and chipped. He'd reported it to the county twice, but nothing ever got done out here. Not unless you knew someone, and Ethan didn't know anyone who mattered. He rolled to a stop, checked left, then right. And that's when she came screaming around the corner. The black Mercedes SUV appeared out of nowhere, tires shrieking as it blew through the intersection at twice the legal limit. Ethan slammed on the brakes, his truck lurching forward as the SUV missed them by inches. The vehicle fishtailed, kicking up a cloud of dust before skidding to a stop 20 feet down the road. "What the hell?" Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He twisted around to check on Mia. "You okay, sweetheart?" Mia's eyes were wide, but she nodded. "I'm okay." Ethan took a breath, trying to steady himself. Then he looked ahead at the SUV, still idling in the middle of the road, and felt anger replace the fear. He threw the truck into park and climbed out. The driver's side door of the Mercedes opened, and a woman stepped out. She was tall, polished, dressed in a cream-colored blazer and dark jeans that probably cost more than Ethan's mortgage payment. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and even from a distance he could see the irritation radiating off her. "Are you out of your mind?" Ethan shouted, striding toward her. "You could have killed us!" The woman looked up, her expression shifting from distraction to indignation in the span of a heartbeat. "Excuse me? You ran a stop sign doing, what, 60, 70? There's a kid in my truck." She glanced at the intersection, then back at him, her jaw tightening. "I didn't see a stop sign." "Of course you didn't. You weren't looking." Ethan stopped a few feet away, fists clenched at his sides. "This isn't some highway. People live here. Kids play here." The woman folded her arms, her gaze cool and assessing. "I'm well aware of where I am, thank you. And I didn't hit you, did I?" Ethan stared at her, stunned. "That's your response? You didn't hit me." "Look, I'm sorry if I startled you." "Startled?" Ethan's voice rose. "You almost killed my daughter." For a moment, something flickered across the woman's face, something almost like guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a mask of calm detachment. "I said I'm sorry," she repeated, her tone clipped. "I'll be more careful." "You should be more careful now," Ethan shot back. "Not after you've run someone off the road." The woman's eyes narrowed. "I don't need a lecture from what? A guy in a beat-up truck?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "Yeah, I get it. You're too important to slow down for the little people." Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away, her composure cracking just slightly. "That's not what I meant." "Sure sounded like it." For a long moment, they stood there in the fading light, the tension between them sharp enough to cut. Ethan could hear Mia calling from the truck, asking if everything was okay. He forced himself to take a breath, to step back. "Just watch where you're going," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "Please." The woman nodded, but she didn't say anything. She turned and walked back to her car, her movements stiff and controlled. Ethan watched as she climbed in, started the engine, and drove off, slower this time, but still with an air of someone who didn't belong here. He stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain out of him. Then he walked back to the truck, where Mia was waiting with wide, worried eyes. "Who was that lady?" she asked as he climbed in. "Nobody, sweetheart," Ethan said, starting the engine. "Just somebody passing through." But as he pulled back onto the road, he couldn't shake the image of her, cold, polished, untouchable. The kind of person who lived in a world so far removed from his that they might as well be on different planets. He didn't think he'd ever see her again. He was wrong. The next morning started the same way every morning started, with Mia jumping on his bed at 6:30, demanding pancakes. "Come on, Daddy, you promised," Ethan groaned, pulling the pillow over his head. "I promised nothing." "You said maybe," Mia countered, bouncing harder. "And maybe means yes." "Since when?" "Since now." Ethan gave up and rolled out of bed, his back protesting as he stretched. 32 wasn't old, but some days it felt like it. He shuffled into the kitchen, Mia trailing behind him like a chattering shadow, and started pulling out ingredients. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living room barely big enough for a couch and a TV. The floors creaked, the walls needed paint, and the roof leaked when it rained hard. But it was theirs. Paid off, owned outright, passed down from his grandparents. Ethan flipped the pancakes while Mia set the table, humming to herself. She was wearing mismatched socks and a t-shirt with a cartoon character he didn't recognize, her hair sticking up in about 7 different directions. "You need a hairbrush, kiddo," he said, sliding a plate in front of her. "Hairbrushes are boring," Mia declared, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "So's looking like you stuck your finger in a socket." She giggled, and Ethan felt the familiar warmth settle in his chest. This was what mattered. Not money, not status, just this. After breakfast, he drove Mia to school, a 15-minute trip down dusty back roads. The elementary school was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where the principal still remembered teaching Ethan in 3rd grade. "Have a good day, sweetheart," Ethan said as Mia hopped out. "You too, Daddy." She waved, then ran off to join a cluster of kids near the playground. Ethan watched her go, then pulled back onto the road. He had work to do, fences to mend, feed to haul, a dozen small jobs that kept him busy from sunup to sundown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. He was halfway to the hardware store when he saw the car. The black Mercedes was pulled off to the side of the road, hazard lights blinking. Ethan slowed, frowning. There wasn't much out here, just fields and the occasional abandoned barn. If someone broke down, they were in for a long wait. He almost kept driving. Almost. But something made him pull over. The woman from yesterday was standing next to the car, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked frustrated, her free hand gesturing sharply as she spoke. When she saw Ethan's truck, she lowered the phone, her expression wary. Ethan climbed out, hands in his pockets. "Car trouble?" She hesitated like she was debating whether to answer. Finally, she nodded. "It won't start. I've called for a tow, but they said it'll be at least an hour." Ethan glanced at the Mercedes, then back at her. "You want me to take a look?" "You know cars? Enough to know when something's wrong." She looked like she wanted to refuse, but after a moment she stepped aside. "Be my guest." Ethan popped the hood and leaned in, checking the battery connections, the belts, the obvious things. Everything looked fine, which meant it was probably something internal, fuel pump, starter, something he couldn't fix on the side of the road. "It's not something I can handle here," he said, straightening. "You'll need that tow." The woman sighed, running a hand over her face. "Of course." Ethan studied her for a moment. She looked different today, less polished, more tired. The blazer was gone, replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. Her hair was down, and there were faint shadows under her eyes. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "Back to the city," she said. "I was visiting someone. Long drive." Tell me about it. An awkward silence settled between them. Ethan shifted his weight, debating. He should leave. Let her wait for the tow. Let her deal with it herself. She wasn't his problem, but something about the way she stood there, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the empty road, made him pause. Look, he said finally, there's a diner about 10 miles up. You can wait there if you want. Better than standing out here in the heat. She looked at him, surprised. You'd drive me? It's on my way. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Thank you. They drove in silence, the radio filling the space between them. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, trying not to think about how strange this was, giving a ride to the woman who'd nearly killed him yesterday. I'm Victoria, by the way, she said suddenly. Victoria Hale. Ethan Carter. I really am sorry about yesterday. I wasn't paying attention. Ethan glanced at her. You already said that. I know, but I mean it. He didn't respond. After a moment, Victoria looked away, her fingers twisting in her lap. The diner appeared ahead, a squat building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that read Mabel's. Ethan pulled into the gravel lot and parked. This is it, he said. Tow truck will know where to find you. Victoria nodded, reaching for the door handle. Then she paused. Can I buy you a coffee as a thank you? Ethan hesitated. He had a dozen things to do, and sitting in a diner with a stranger wasn't on the list. But something in her voice, something tentative, almost hopeful, made him say yes. Inside, the diner was exactly what you'd expect. Vinyl booths, checkered floors, the smell of burnt coffee, and bacon grease. Mabel herself, a woman in her 60s with a voice like gravel, greeted them from behind the counter. Ethan Carter, as I live and breathe. Where's that little girl of yours? School, Ethan said, sliding into a booth. Mabel, this is Victoria. Her car broke down. Mabel gave Victoria a once-over, her expression unreadable. Well, aren't you a long way from anywhere fancy? Coffee? Please, Victoria said, managing a polite smile. Mabel poured 2 cups and shuffled off, leaving them alone. Victoria wrapped her hands around the mug, staring into the dark liquid. This place is charming, Ethan snorted. You don't have to lie. It's a dive. I didn't mean, it's fine. He took a sip of his coffee, which was, as always, terrible. You don't strike me as the diner type. Victoria smiled faintly. No, I'm not. So what brings you out here, besides bad driving? She looked up sharply, but there was no real anger in her eyes. I was visiting family, or trying to. It didn't go well. Family's complicated, Ethan said. Yours too? Don't have much left, just me and Mia. Victoria tilted her head. Mia's your daughter? Yeah, she's 6. Pain in the ass, but I wouldn't trade her for anything. A flicker of something, longing, maybe, crossed Victoria's face. She's lucky to have you. Ethan shrugged. I'm lucky to have her. They sat in silence for a while, the noise of the diner washing over them. Ethan found himself studying her, the way she held herself, the careful control in every movement. She was guarded, he realized, scared of something. What do you do? He asked. For work, I mean. Victoria hesitated. I run a company, consulting mostly, corporate strategy, acquisitions. Sounds important. It is. She paused. Or it's supposed to be. You don't sound convinced. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time the mask slipped. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Can't say I do. Lucky you. Before he could respond, Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then sighed. Tow truck's here. They stood, and Ethan followed her outside. The tow truck was already hooking up the Mercedes, the driver, a grizzled man named Pete, waving at Ethan. Thanks for the coffee, Victoria said, turning to face him. And the ride. I appreciate it. No problem. She smiled, and for a moment she looked almost young, uncertain, human. Maybe I'll see you around, she said. Ethan nodded, but he didn't believe it. People like her didn't stick around places like this. He watched as she climbed into the tow truck, watched as it pulled away, kicking up dust in its wake. Then he got back in his truck and drove home. The call came 3 hours later. Ethan was in the barn sorting through old tools when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Mr. Carter? A woman's voice, official and clipped. This is Deputy Marshal with the County Sheriff's Office. We have a situation involving a Victoria Hale. She listed you as an emergency contact. Ethan's stomach dropped. What happened? There's been an accident. Her vehicle went off Route 47 into Miller's Creek. We've got rescue crews on site now, but Ethan didn't hear the rest. He was already running. Route 47 was chaos when he arrived. Police cars, an ambulance, a fire truck, all clustered at the bridge where the road curved sharply over the creek. Ethan skidded to a stop and jumped out, his heart pounding. A deputy tried to stop him. Sir, you can't. I'm Ethan Carter. You called me. The deputy's expression shifted. Right, this way. They led him to the edge of the bridge, where he could see the black Mercedes 20 feet below, half submerged in the muddy water. Rescue divers were in the creek, working frantically. What happened? Ethan asked, his voice barely steady. Looks like she lost control on the curve, the deputy said. Car went through the guardrail. We got the call about 10 minutes ago from a passing driver. Ethan stared at the wreckage, his mind racing. 10 minutes. Not long, but long enough. Is she... They're bringing her up now. Ethan watched, frozen, as the divers surfaced. One of them was carrying something, someone, Victoria, her body limp, her face pale. They hauled her onto the bank, and the paramedics swarmed. Ethan couldn't hear what they were saying, couldn't process the flurry of movement. All he could see was Victoria, motionless, water dripping from her hair. And then, miraculously, she coughed. Water spilled from her mouth as she gasped, her body convulsing. The paramedics rolled her onto her side and she coughed again, harder this time, her chest heaving. She's breathing, one of them shouted. Ethan didn't realize he'd been holding his breath until he let it out in a shaky exhale. They loaded her onto a stretcher, wrapping her in blankets, checking her vitals. Ethan moved closer and one of the paramedics glanced up. You family? No, a friend. The paramedic nodded. She's lucky. Another few minutes and... He didn't finish the sentence. Ethan looked down at Victoria. Her eyes were closed, her lips tinged blue, but she was alive. Can I ride with her? He asked. The paramedic hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, come on. The hospital was small, the kind of place that handled broken bones and flu outbreaks, but not much else. They rushed Victoria into an exam room, and Ethan was left standing in the waiting area, still covered in mud from the creek bank. He didn't know why he'd stayed. Didn't know why he felt responsible. But here he was. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, a doctor emerged, a tired-looking woman in her 40s. You're here for Ms. Hale? Ethan stood. Yeah, how is she? Stable. Mild hypothermia, some bruising, but no serious injuries. She was very lucky. Can I see her? The doctor hesitated. She's resting, but yes, room 12. Ethan walked down the narrow hallway, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. He found room 12 and pushed the door open. Victoria was lying in the bed, her eyes closed, an IV drip attached to her arm. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the sharp, polished woman who'd nearly run him off the road. He pulled a chair up beside the bed and sat down, unsure what to do. After a few minutes, her eyes fluttered open. Ethan? Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Yeah, it's me. She blinked, trying to focus. What are you doing here? You listed me as an emergency contact. Don't ask me why. A faint smile tugged at her lips. I don't know anyone else out here. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Victoria closed her eyes again, her breathing slow and even. Did they get me out? The divers did. You were underwater when I got there. Her hand twitched, and without thinking, Ethan reached out and took it. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. I thought I was going to die, she whispered. You didn't. I know. She opened her eyes, looking at him. Thank you. I didn't do anything. You came. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence, her hand still in his, the machines beeping softly in the background. Finally, Victoria spoke again. I don't want to go back. To the city? To my life. Her voice cracked. I don't want to go back to any of it. Ethan looked at her, at the tears pooling in the corners of her eyes, and felt something shift inside him. Then don't, he said quietly. She stared at him. What? Don't go back. Not yet anyway. Stay here. Figure things out. I can't just... Why not? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. You almost died today. If that's not a reason to take a step back, I don't know what is. She was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly he almost didn't hear it, she said, Okay. Okay? I'll stay, for a little while. Ethan nodded, even though he had no idea what he'd just agreed to. No idea what this would mean. All he knew was that the woman lying in this hospital bed, broken, scared, but still breathing, needed help. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted to be the one to give it. The hospital discharged Victoria the next afternoon with a stack of papers, a prescription for antibiotics, and instructions to rest. Ethan stood in the lobby, keys in hand, wondering what the hell he was doing. You don't have to do this, Victoria said for the third time as they walked to his truck. She was moving slowly, one hand pressed to her ribs where the seatbelt had bruised them. You got somewhere else to go? Ethan asked. She didn't answer. He opened the passenger door and waited while she climbed in, wincing with each movement. Her clothes, the same sweater and jeans from yesterday, were still damp in places, smelling faintly of river water and antiseptic. I can get a hotel, she said once he was behind the wheel. Nearest one's 40 miles away. Then I'll drive 40 miles. With what car? Ethan pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward the main road. Your Mercedes is halfway to the junkyard by now. Victoria slumped back against the seat, defeat written across her face. I'll rent something. You will. Tomorrow. Today you're staying at my place. Ethan, it's not a discussion. He glanced at her. You got hypothermia yesterday. Doctor said you need to rest, stay warm, not be alone. So unless you've got a better plan, you're stuck with me. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. After a moment, she turned to look out the window, her reflection pale and drawn in the glass. They drove in silence, the Kansas landscape rolling past, fields of winter wheat, bare trees, the occasional farmhouse set back from the road. It was late afternoon, the sky already starting to fade toward dusk. I called my assistant this morning, Victoria said quietly. Told her I'd be out for a week. Maybe 2. Ethan nodded. What'd she say? That I've never taken more than 3 days off in 6 years. Sounds about right. Victoria looked at him. You don't even know me. I know enough. He turned onto the gravel road that led to his property. I know you work too hard, drive too fast, and don't know how to ask for help. That about cover it? A faint smile crossed her lips. That's surprisingly accurate. I'm smarter than I look. I never said you weren't smart. You didn't have to. The house appeared ahead, small and weathered, smoke curling from the chimney. Ethan had left the fire going that morning, knowing he'd be bringing her back here. The sun was sinking low, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. He parked and climbed out, then came around to help Victoria. She took his arm, leaning on him more than she probably wanted to admit, and they made their way up the porch steps. Inside, the house was warm, the scent of wood smoke mixing with the faint smell of coffee. Ethan guided her to the couch and went to grab blankets from the hall closet. I'm fine, Victoria protested as he draped one over her shoulders. You don't need to humor me, she sighed, but didn't argue further. Ethan disappeared into the kitchen and returned a few minutes later with 2 mugs of tea, the only thing he had that seemed appropriate for someone recovering from near drowning. Thanks, Victoria said, wrapping her hands around the mug. Ethan sat down in the armchair across from her, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. Mia wouldn't be home for another hour. It was just the 2 of them, and he had no idea what to say. This is weird, isn't it? Victoria said, as if reading his mind. Little bit. I don't usually... She trailed off, staring into her tea. I don't usually need help. From anyone. Yeah, I got that impression. And now I'm sitting in a stranger's house, drinking tea, because I drove my car into a river. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. My therapist would have a field day with this. You have a therapist? Had. I stopped going 6 months ago. Didn't have time. Ethan took a sip of his tea, which was too hot and tasted like nothing. What happened yesterday? With the car, I mean. You lose control on the curve? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. I was driving and then I wasn't. It happened so fast. You hit ice? Maybe. Or I just wasn't paying attention. She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed. I've been doing that a lot lately, not paying attention. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He'd seen the guardrail where her car went through, metal twisted and torn, skid marks leading right off the edge. However it happened, she was lucky to be alive. You should rest, he said finally. Guest rooms down the hall, beds made up. I don't want to put you out. You're not. Victoria set down her mug and stood, swaying slightly. Ethan moved to steady her, his hand on her elbow. I'm okay, she said, but she didn't pull away. He walked her to the guest room, a small space with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the back field. It wasn't much, but it was clean. If you need anything, I'll be in the kitchen, Ethan said. Victoria sat down on the edge of the bed, looking around the room like she was trying to figure out how she'd ended up here. Ethan? Yeah? Why are you doing this? He hesitated in the doorway, one hand on the frame. I don't know. Maybe because nobody did it for me when I needed it. Before she could respond, he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Mia came home an hour later, bursting through the front door with her usual hurricane energy. Daddy, guess what? We made volcanoes in science, and mine exploded the biggest, and... She stopped short, her eyes going wide. Why is that lady's car not here? But she is. Ethan looked up from the stove where he was attempting to make something that resembled dinner. Her name's Victoria, and she's staying with us for a few days. Why? Because she had an accident and needs a place to rest. Mia's eyes got even wider. What kind of accident? The kind where you end up in the hospital. Nothing for you to worry about. Mia considered this, then shrugged and dropped her backpack on the floor. Is she nice? I think so. Does she still like ice cream? I have no idea. I'm going to ask her. Mia started toward the hallway, but Ethan caught her by the shoulder. She's sleeping. You can ask her tomorrow. But tomorrow, Mia. She pouted, but didn't argue. Instead, she climbed onto a kitchen chair and started swinging her legs, watching Ethan cook. What are you making? Spaghetti. You always make spaghetti when you don't know what to make. It's called being consistent. It's called being boring. Ethan pointed the wooden spoon at her. You want to cook? No? Then zip it. Mia grinned, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Just the two of them, the same routine they'd had for years. Except now there was a woman sleeping in the guest room. A woman Ethan barely knew, and he had no idea what he was doing. They ate dinner at the small kitchen table, Mia chattering about school, about her friend Emma, who brought a lizard to show and tell, about the boy who pulled her hair at recess. Ethan listened, nodding in the right places, but his mind kept drifting to the closed door down the hall. After dinner, Mia took her bath, complaining the entire time, and Ethan tucked her into bed, reading her favorite story about a girl who lived in a lighthouse. Daddy? Mia said as he was turning off the light. Yeah, kiddo. Is Victoria going to be okay? Ethan paused in the doorway. I think so. Why? You look worried. He managed a smile. I'm not worried, just tired. You're always tired. That's what happens when you have a kid. Mia stuck her tongue out at him, and Ethan laughed despite himself. Good night, troublemaker. Night, Daddy. He closed the door and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the quiet house. Then he walked to the guest room and knocked softly. No answer. He opened the door a crack and peered inside. Victoria was asleep, curled on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek. She looked younger like this, the hard edges softened by sleep. Ethan closed the door and went to the living room, where he sat in his armchair and stared at the dying fire. He should add more wood, should probably clean up the kitchen, should do a lot of things. Instead, he just sat there, trying to figure out what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Victoria woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back, the accident, the hospital, Ethan. She sat up slowly, every muscle in her body aching. Her ribs throbbed with each breath, and her head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. But she was alive. She found her phone on the nightstand, the screen cracked but still working. 17 missed calls, 34 emails, a dozen text messages. All from work, all urgent, all demanding her immediate attention. Victoria stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she turned the phone off and set it back down. She made her way to the bathroom, moving like an old woman, and caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her hair was a tangled mess, her face pale and bruised along the left cheekbone. She looked like she'd been in a fight, which, in a way, she had. After washing up as best she could, she followed the smell of coffee to the kitchen. Ethan was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes, while Mia sat at the table drawing on a piece of paper. "You're awake," Mia said, looking up. "Daddy said you were really tired, so I couldn't wake you up, but now you're awake, so can I ask you something?" "Mia, let her breathe," Ethan said, without turning around. Victoria managed a smile. "It's okay. What did you want to ask?" "Do you like ice cream?" Yes? What's your favorite flavor?" Vanilla?" Mia wrinkled her nose. "That's boring. Mine's cookie dough." "That's a good one, too," Victoria said diplomatically. Ethan slid a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Coffee?" "Please." He poured her a mug and set it down, then returned to the stove. Victoria sat down across from Mia, who was now drawing what appeared to be a very enthusiastic dinosaur. "What are you working on?" Victoria asked. "T-Rex eating people," Mia said cheerfully. "See? That's the people screaming. Very detailed." "Thank you." Ethan brought his own plate to the table and sat down. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence, the only sound the scrape of forks on plates and Mia's humming. "How are you feeling?" Ethan asked finally. "Sore, but better than yesterday." "You look better than yesterday, which isn't saying much." Victoria smiled despite herself. "Thanks?" "Daddy says you drove into a river," Mia said, looking up from her drawing. "Did it hurt?" It's okay," Victoria said. She looked at the little girl, at those wide, curious eyes, and decided to be honest. "Yeah, it hurt, and it was really scary." "Were you crying?" "A little." "I cry when I'm scared too," Mia said matter-of-factly. "One time I thought there was a monster in my closet, and I cried for like an hour. But Daddy showed me there wasn't any monster, just old clothes." "Sounds like your dad's pretty brave." "He's the bravest." Mia went back to her drawing. "But he's scared of spiders." "I am not," Ethan protested. "You are too. Remember when that big one was in the bathroom and you made me kill it?" "I didn't make you. I asked politely." Victoria found herself laughing, a real laugh that made her ribs ache but felt good anyway. "So you're the spider killer in this house?" "Somebody's gotta be," Mia said proudly. After breakfast, Ethan drove Mia to school, leaving Victoria alone in the house. She wandered through the small rooms, taking in the details she'd missed the night before. Family photos on the walls, Ethan and Mia, Ethan and a woman who must have been his wife. The woman was pretty, dark-haired, smiling in every picture. Victoria found herself staring at one photo in particular, taken at what looked like a county fair. The woman was holding a stuffed bear, Ethan's arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing. "That's Sarah!" Victoria jumped, turning to find Ethan standing in the doorway. She hadn't heard him come back. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I wasn't trying to snoop." "You weren't." He walked over and stood beside her, looking at the photo. "She died 4 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." He was quiet for a moment. "She would have liked you, I think. She always liked people who didn't take shit from anyone." Victoria didn't know what to say to that. She turned away from the photo, suddenly uncomfortable. "I should probably figure out my car situation and a rental." "Already called Pete. Your car's totaled. Insurance will handle it, but it's going to take a few days." "And the rental?" "Closest place is in Hutchinson. I can drive you tomorrow if you want." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm offering." Victoria looked at him, this man who kept helping her for no reason she could understand. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why are you being so nice to me? I almost killed you. I drove into a river. I'm a complete mess." Ethan leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. You want the truth? Yes. I don't know. Maybe because you remind me of Sarah a little. She was stubborn, too. Wouldn't ask for help even when she was dying. His voice caught slightly on the last word. I couldn't help her. But I can help you. So I am. Victoria felt something twist in her chest. I'm not dying. No, you're not. But you're drowning anyway. The words hit harder than they should have. Victoria turned away, blinking back sudden tears. I should call my office. Let them know I'll be out longer than I thought. Good idea. She went to the guest room and retrieved her phone, turning it on with shaking hands. The screen immediately lit up with notifications. More calls, more emails, more demands. She scrolled through them, feeling the familiar weight settle on her shoulders. Then she opened her contacts, found her assistant's number, and dialed. Victoria, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. The Mercer deal is falling apart, and Jenkins is threatening to walk, and… Sarah, Victoria interrupted. I need you to handle it. Silence on the other end. Handle it? Handle what? All of it. The Mercer deal, Jenkins, whatever else comes up. I'm taking a leave of absence. A leave of what? For how long? I don't know. A month, maybe more. Victoria, you can't just… I can. And I am. You're more than capable. You've been doing half my job for the last year anyway. That's not the point. It is the point. I trust you. Handle it. She hung up before Sarah could argue further, then turned off her phone again. Her hands were shaking, her heart racing. She'd just walked away from everything she'd built, everything she'd worked for, and it felt terrifying and liberating all at once. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Ethan would wake early, make coffee, start breakfast. Victoria would emerge from the guest room, still moving slowly but getting stronger each day. They'd eat together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with halting conversation. Then Ethan would drive Mia to school while Victoria did nothing. It was the nothing that got to her. She wasn't used to it. Her whole life had been scheduled down to the minute. Meetings, calls, emails, deadlines. Now she had hours stretching ahead of her with no purpose, no direction. On the third day, she started cleaning. Not because Ethan's house was dirty, it wasn't exactly, but because she needed something to do with her hands. She reorganized the kitchen cabinets, scrubbed the bathroom until it gleamed, even tackled the windows. Ethan came home to find her on a stepladder, wiping down the top of the refrigerator. What are you doing? He asked, setting down a bag of groceries. Cleaning. I can see that. Why? Because it needed it. Did it? Victoria climbed down, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I needed something to do. Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough, but you're supposed to be resting. I've rested enough, says the woman who nearly drowned 4 days ago. I'm fine. You're stubborn. So you've mentioned. He started unpacking groceries, and Victoria found herself helping, passing him items to put away. It was domestic and strange and oddly comfortable. Mia wants to know if you'll help her make cookies, Ethan said as he put a carton of milk in the fridge. Cookies? Chocolate chip, her favorite. I usually burn them, so she figured you might do better. I've never made cookies in my life. Ethan grinned. Then you'll both be learning together. That afternoon, Victoria found herself in the kitchen with Mia, surrounded by flour and sugar and butter. Mia chattered non-stop, explaining the rules of cookie making, how you had to taste the dough even though Daddy said not to, how the chocolate chips had to be the good kind, how the cookies tasted better if you made silly faces while mixing. Like this, Mia said, sticking out her tongue and crossing her eyes while stirring the bowl. Victoria laughed. I don't think that's in the recipe. It's in my recipe. They got flour everywhere, on the counter, on the floor, somehow in Victoria's hair. When they finally slid the first batch into the oven, Mia high-fived her with a flour-covered hand. We did it, Mia said. We're a team. Victoria looked down at the little girl, at her bright eyes and wide smile, and felt something crack inside her chest. When was the last time she'd done something just for fun, just to make a kid happy? She couldn't remember. The cookies turned out lopsided and slightly burnt on the bottom, but Mia declared them the best cookies in the whole world. And that was enough. That night, after Mia was in bed, Victoria and Ethan sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. The air was cold, and Victoria wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and earth. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For this. For letting me stay. For not asking questions." Ooh. Ethan was silent for a moment. "You want to talk about it? Whatever you're running from?" Victoria looked out at the darkness, at the vast expanse of nothing that surrounded this place. "I'm not running. I'm just trying to figure out who I am when I'm not working." "And?" "I have no idea." She laughed softly. 38 years old and I don't know who I am. Pathetic, right? Not pathetic. Human. They sat in silence for a while, the night sounds of rural Kansas filling the space between them. Crickets, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of wind through bare trees. "I had everything," Victoria said finally. "The career, the money, the success, and I was miserable. I am miserable, but I didn't know how to stop." "What changed?" "I drove into a river." She looked at him. "And you pulled me out. Divers pulled you out. You know what I mean." Ethan met her gaze and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe. A recognition. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," he said. "You've got time." "Do I?" "Yeah, you do." Victoria wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that she could stay here, in this quiet place, and somehow put herself back together. But she didn't know if she was capable of it. She didn't know if she was capable of anything anymore. A week passed, then 2. Victoria stopped counting the days. She helped Mia with homework, learned to make breakfast without burning the eggs, took long walks through the fields surrounding Ethan's property. The bruises faded. Her ribs stopped aching. Slowly, she started to feel almost human again. But the nights were hard. That's when the doubts crept in, when she'd lie awake in the guest room and wonder what the hell she was doing. She'd built a career, a life, and now she was playing house with a widower and his daughter in the middle of nowhere. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. One night she gave up on sleep and padded into the kitchen for water. Ethan was already there, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, even though it was past midnight. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. He looked up, startled. "Something like that." Victoria sat down across from him. "What's keeping you up?" "The usual. Bills. Work. Mia's parent-teacher conference next week. The fact that my truck's making a noise that probably means something expensive is about to break." He took a sip of coffee. "You?" "Everything. Nothing. I don't know." "That's specific." She smiled despite herself. "I keep thinking I should go back to my life, my job, but every time I think about it, I feel like I can't breathe." "Then don't go back. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Victoria stared at him. "Because that's my life. That's who I am." "Is it? Or is it just what you do?" The question hung in the air between them. Victoria didn't have an answer. Ethan stood and refilled his coffee, then poured a second cup and slid it across the table to her. "You know what Sarah told me? Right before she died?" Victoria shook her head. "She said she wasted too much time worrying about things that didn't matter. Too much time trying to be perfect, to do everything right. She said if she had it to do over, she'd spend more time just living." His voice was rough. "I think about that a lot. About all the time we wasted." "I'm sorry," Victoria said softly. "Me too." He sat back down. "But I learned something from it. Life's too short to be miserable. Too short to spend it doing things that make you feel like you're drowning." Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm mug, letting his words sink in. "What if I don't know how to do anything else?" "Then you learn, same as everyone else. It's not that easy." "No, it's not. But it's possible." They sat in the quiet kitchen, drinking coffee that was too strong and probably a terrible idea this late at night. But Victoria didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt like someone actually understood. Like maybe she wasn't completely lost after all. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said after a while. "Sure." "Well, why'd you list me as your emergency contact? We barely knew each other." Victoria looked down at her coffee. Because you were the only person who'd been kind to me in months, maybe years. And I thought, if something happened, I wanted someone who'd actually care. You don't think your friends would care? I don't have friends. I have colleagues, acquaintances, people who want something from me. She met his eyes. But not friends. Ethan nodded slowly. Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you put my name down. Glad you're here. Even though I'm a mess, especially because you're a mess, means you're real. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back. Thank you. For what? For giving me a place to fall apart. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed her hand just once. Any time. They finished their coffee in companionable silence, and when Victoria finally went back to bed, she slept better than she had in weeks. The morning broke cold and gray, the kind of weather that made you want to stay in bed forever. Victoria woke to the sound of rain against the window, a steady drumming that seemed to match the rhythm of her thoughts. She'd been here 3 weeks now, and the idea of leaving felt more distant every day. She found Ethan in the kitchen, staring at his phone with an expression she couldn't quite read. Everything okay? She asked. He looked up, and she saw the tension in his jaw. Mia's school just called. She's sick, fever, throwing up, the whole deal. Do you need to go get her? Yeah, but I've got a job in an hour that I can't cancel. Guy needs his tractor fixed before planting season. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I'll have to bring her with me, let her sleep in the truck. Or I could stay with her, Victoria said before she could think better of it. Ethan blinked. You? Why not? I've handled board meetings with hostile investors. I think I can manage one sick 6-year-old. It's not the same thing. I know it's not, but I can do it. She met his eyes. Let me help. He hesitated, clearly debating. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but call me if anything gets worse, and I mean anything. I will. I promise. Ethan grabbed his keys and headed for the door, then stopped. She likes ginger ale when she's sick. And crackers. Plain ones, nothing fancy. Got it. And she'll probably want to watch cartoons, but not the scary ones. She gets nightmares. Ethan, I've got this. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just nodded and left. 20 minutes later, Victoria was standing in the elementary school office, signing Mia out. The little girl looked miserable, her face pale and clammy, her usual energy completely drained. My tummy hurts, Mia said quietly as Victoria led her to the car. I know, sweetheart. We'll get you home and into bed, okay? The drive back was mercifully short. Victoria got Mia inside, helped her into pajamas, and settled her on the couch with a blanket and a bucket nearby, just in case. Then she went to the kitchen to find ginger ale and crackers, feeling completely out of her depth. She'd never done this before. Never taken care of a sick child, never even been around kids much. What if she screwed it up? What if Mia got worse and she didn't know what to do? Victoria, Mia's small voice called from the living room. Victoria grabbed the supplies and went back to the couch. Yeah, honey. Can you sit with me? I don't like being sick alone. Something in Victoria's chest tightened. Of course. She sat down on the edge of the couch, and Mia immediately curled against her side. Victoria froze for a second, unsure what to do, then carefully put her arm around the little girl. My mom used to read to me when I was sick, Mia said softly, but I don't remember what she sounded like anymore. Victoria's throat constricted. I'm sure she had a beautiful voice. Daddy says she did. He says she sang me lullabies. Mia was quiet for a moment. Do you know any lullabies? No, I'm sorry. That's okay. Can you just talk to me so I'm not scared? Victoria looked down at this small, trusting person and felt something shift inside her. What do you want me to talk about? Anything. Tell me about when you were little. So Victoria did. She told Mia about growing up in Chicago, about her strict parents who expected nothing less than perfection, about the private schools and piano lessons and constant pressure to achieve. She told her about the first time she failed a test and was so terrified to go home that she hid in the school library until it closed. That's sad, Mia said, her eyes drooping. Didn't they hug you? Victoria thought about it. Not really, they weren't the hugging type. Daddy hugs me all the time, even when I don't want him to. That's because he loves you. Did your parents love you? The question was so simple, so innocent, but it hit Victoria like a punch to the gut. I think they did. They just didn't know how to show it. Mia was quiet for a long time, and Victoria thought she'd fallen asleep. But then the little girl said, I'm glad you're here. Me too, sweetheart. They sat like that for hours, Victoria holding Mia while she dozed fitfully. The rain continued outside, and at some point Victoria reached for a book on the coffee table, some children's story about a dragon, and started reading aloud, even though Mia was asleep. It felt good, reading to someone, taking care of someone, being needed. When Ethan came home that evening, he found them on the couch together, Mia asleep against Victoria's shoulder, Victoria's hand absently stroking the girl's hair. How is she? He asked quietly. Fever broke about an hour ago. She kept down some crackers. Ethan nodded, something unreadable crossing his face. Thank you. It's nothing. It's not nothing. He sat down in the armchair, and for a moment they just looked at each other. You're good with her. I'm figuring it out as I go. Aren't we all? Victoria looked down at Mia, at this little person who'd somehow worked her way into Victoria's carefully guarded heart. She asked me about my parents today, about whether they loved me. What'd you tell her? The truth, that I think they did, but they didn't know how to show it. Ethan was quiet. And do you believe that? Victoria thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know, maybe. Or maybe I just want to believe it because the alternative is too painful. Nothing wrong with that. Isn't there? Lying to yourself? It's not lying, it's surviving. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. We all tell ourselves stories to get through the day. That's not weakness. That's just being human. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. When did you get so wise? Right around the time my wife died and I had to figure out how to raise a kid by myself. His voice was rough. You learn fast when you don't have a choice. They sat in comfortable silence until Mia stirred, blinking sleepily. Daddy? Hey, baby girl. How you feeling? Better. Victoria took good care of me. Ethan smiled. I bet she did. That night, after Mia was in bed and the house was quiet, Victoria stood at the kitchen window and stared out at the rain. She should call her office, check in, make sure everything was running smoothly. But she didn't want to. Didn't want to think about conference calls and quarterly reports and all the things that used to matter so much. You're thinking too loud, Ethan said from behind her. She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. Sorry, what's going on in that head of yours? Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything. Nothing. I don't know. He walked over and stood beside her, both of them looking out at the darkness. You're allowed to not have all the answers, you know? That's the problem. I've always had the answers. That was my thing. People came to me to fix their problems, to tell them what to do. And now I can't even figure out my own life. Welcome to the club. Population, everyone. You seem to have it figured out. Do I? Ethan shook his head. I'm a 32-year-old widower living in his grandparents' house, barely making ends meet, raising a kid who deserves better than what I can give her. If that's having it figured out, we're all in trouble. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him. Mia doesn't need more than what you give her. She needs you. And you're enough. Am I? Yes. He turned to face her, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with something Victoria couldn't name, something that made her breath catch and her pulse quicken. Victoria! Whatever he was about to say was interrupted by a crash of thunder that shook the windows. They both jumped, then laughed nervously. I should check on Mia, Ethan said, stepping back. Make sure the storm doesn't wake her. Right, yeah. He left and Victoria stood there alone, her heart still racing. What was that? What had almost happened? She didn't know, didn't want to know, because acknowledging it meant admitting that something had changed between them, something that couldn't be unchanged, and that terrified her more than anything. The next morning, Victoria woke to bright sunshine and the smell of bacon. Mia was already up, bouncing around the kitchen with her usual energy, apparently completely recovered. Victoria! Victoria! Daddy says we can go to the creek today if the water's not too high. Can you come, please? I don't know, honey. I'm not really dressed for... Please? It'll be fun. We can skip rocks and look for frogs and everything. Victoria looked at Ethan, who shrugged. Your call. But she's not going to let it go. Fine. But I'm holding you responsible if I end up covered in mud. Deal. An hour later, Victoria found herself trudging through a field in borrowed boots, following Ethan and Mia toward the creek. The sun was warm on her face and the air smelled like wet earth and growing things. This is where Daddy proposed to Mom, Mia said, pointing to a spot where the creek widened into a small pool. He says she almost fell in. She did fall in, Ethan corrected, but that was after she said yes. Victoria tried to imagine it. Ethan, younger, probably nervous, getting down on one knee by this muddy creek. It was sweet, genuine. Everything her life had never been. They spent the afternoon there, Mia teaching Victoria how to skip rocks, which Victoria was terrible at, and catching tadpoles in a plastic bucket. Ethan sat on the bank, watching them, a small smile on his face. You're really bad at this, Mia said, as Victoria's rock sank immediately for the 5th time. I'm aware. Here, like this, Mia demonstrated, her rock skipping 3 times before disappearing. See? Easy. For you, maybe. They tried for another 20 minutes before Victoria finally managed to get a rock to skip once. She threw her hands up in victory, and Mia cheered like she'd just won the Olympics. Not bad, Ethan called from the bank. Not bad. I'm a natural. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Victoria stuck her tongue out at him, and he laughed. The sound was warm and genuine, and it made something in her chest ache. Later, as they were packing up to leave, Mia ran ahead, chasing a butterfly. Victoria and Ethan walked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing. This was nice, Victoria said. Thank you for letting me crash your day. You didn't crash anything. Mia wanted you here, so did I. She looked at him. Yeah? Yeah. He paused. You fit here, you know. With us. Victoria's breath caught. Ethan, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know that you're not just some guest we're tolerating. You're part of this now, if you want to be. Victoria didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to run, to get in her car, when she finally got one, and drive back to her old life where everything was predictable and safe. But another part, a bigger part, wanted to stay, wanted to see where this led. I want to be, she said finally. I'm just scared. Of what? Of screwing it up, of hurting you, of this not being real. Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. It's real. Maybe it's messy and complicated and makes no sense, but it's real. How can you be sure? Because I haven't felt this alive in 4 years. His voice was rough with emotion. Because when I wake up in the morning, I'm actually looking forward to the day. Because Mia smiles more than she has since her mother died. That's how I know. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person you think I am. I think you're exactly who you are, and that's enough. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she could stay here in this simple life and be happy. But years of conditioning, of always striving for more, of never being satisfied, made it hard to accept that maybe this quiet, ordinary existence was what she'd been looking for all along. Can I ask you something? Victoria said, wiping her eyes. Anything. What happens when I go back? To my real life? Ethan's expression shifted, something guarded sliding into place. Is that what you're planning, to go back? I don't know. But eventually I'll have to make a decision. And I need to know, what happens to us? There is no us if you're in the city and I'm here. So that's it? All or nothing. What do you want me to say, Victoria? That we'll make it work long distance? That I'll move to the city with Mia and give up everything I have here? He shook his head. I can't do that. And I don't think you'd want me to. So what then? So you decide what you want, and I'll be here either way. Victoria stared at him, feeling the weight of the choice pressing down on her. Stay here and build a life with Ethan and Mia, giving up everything she'd worked for. Or go back to her career, her success, and lose whatever this was before it even had a chance to begin. It shouldn't have been a hard choice, but it was the hardest thing she'd ever faced. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind racing with possibilities and fears and what-ifs. Finally, she gave up and went to the living room, curling up on the couch with a blanket. She found herself thinking about the accident, about those moments underwater when she thought she was going to die. What had she thought about? Not her career, not her accomplishments, or her bank account, or her corner office. She'd thought about her parents, about how they'd probably cry at her funeral, but wouldn't really understand what had killed her. She'd thought about all the things she'd never done. Never fallen in love, never had a family, never let herself be vulnerable enough to really live. And then Ethan had pulled her out. Not physically, the divers did that. But he'd pulled her out of the life that was drowning her, given her a chance to breathe. What was she supposed to do with that? Can't sleep? Victoria jumped. Ethan was standing in the doorway wearing sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, his hair sticking up in all directions. Sorry, did I wake you? No, I heard you moving around. He came and sat in the armchair. You want to talk about it? Not really. Okay. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. I'm sorry, Victoria said finally. About earlier. Asking what happens when I leave. That wasn't fair. You're allowed to ask questions. But not ones that hurt you. Ethan looked at her, his expression soft in the dim light. You're going to hurt me either way. If you stay, you'll eventually resent me for making you give up your life. If you go, I'll resent myself for letting you. So we're doomed either way. Maybe, or maybe we figure it out as we go, same as everything else. Victoria pulled the blanket tighter around herself. I don't know how to do uncertain. I'm used to 5-year plans and quarterly projections. This is terrifying? Yeah. Welcome to real life. He stood and held out his hand. Come on. Where are we going? Just trust me. Victoria took his hand and let him lead her to the back door. He grabbed 2 jackets from the hook and handed her one. Then they stepped out onto the porch. The night was clear and cold, the stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. Ethan sat down on the porch steps, and Victoria joined him. When Sarah was sick, he said after a moment, she used to come out here at night, said it helped her think, made her problems feel smaller. Victoria looked up at the vast expanse of sky. Did it work? Sometimes. Other times it just reminded her how little time she had left. His voice was thick. But she kept coming out here anyway. Said even if she couldn't fix things, at least she could feel small for a while, less responsible for everything. She sounds like she was a good person. She was. Not perfect. She had a temper, could hold a grudge like nobody's business, but she was good. He paused. You remind me of her sometimes. Not in looks or personality, but in the way you're fighting yourself. What do you mean? She spent so long trying to be strong, to handle everything on her own, that she forgot how to ask for help. Even when she was dying, she was more worried about everyone else than herself. He looked at Victoria. You do the same thing. Act like you don't need anyone, like you can handle everything alone. Maybe because I can. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Victoria felt the words settle over her like a weight. I don't know how to be any other way. Then learn. Same as you learn to skip rocks. Same as you learn to take care of Mia. One step at a time. They sat in silence, watching the stars, and Victoria felt some of the tension leave her body. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe she didn't need to have all the answers right now. Maybe it was okay to just be here, in this moment, and figure out the rest later. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Do you ever wish you'd done things differently with Sarah? Ethan was quiet for a long time. Every day. I wish I'd spent less time working, more time just being with her. I wish I'd told her I loved her more often. I wish I'd taken her on that trip to the ocean she always wanted. His voice broke. I wish I'd had more time. I'm sorry. Me too. He took a shaky breath. But I learned something from it. That you can't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect time. You just have to do it. Live. Love. Take the risk, because tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Victoria turned to look at him and found him already looking at her. The space between them felt electric, charged with everything they weren't saying. Ethan, I know this is complicated, he said. I know you have a life back in the city, a career, responsibilities. And I'm not asking you to give all that up for me, but I am asking you to consider that maybe there's another way. Maybe you don't have to choose between your old life and this one. Maybe you can build something new. I don't know if I can. Then let me help you figure it out. He reached over and took her hand, and Victoria felt tears spill down her cheeks. What if I'm not strong enough? You drove your car into a river and survived. I think you're stronger than you know. Victoria laughed through her tears. That's a low bar. Maybe. But you cleared it. They sat there on the porch steps, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. And for the first time since the accident, Victoria felt like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. Victoria's hand was still warm from where Ethan had held it, and she could feel the ghost of his touch, even after he'd let go. The next morning arrived with the kind of brightness that made yesterday's vulnerability feel exposed and raw. Victoria stood at the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection and wondering what the hell she was doing. She'd held hands with Ethan. She'd cried in front of him. She'd admitted things she'd never admitted to anyone, and now she had to face him over breakfast like it was normal. When she finally worked up the courage to leave the guest room, she found the kitchen empty except for a note on the counter in Ethan's messy handwriting. Took Mia to school early. Help yourself to coffee. Back in an hour. Victoria felt a mix of relief and disappointment. She poured herself coffee and sat at the table, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in her chest. Her phone, which she'd been ignoring for weeks, sat on the counter, turned off and forgotten. She should check it. Should see what fires needed putting out, what deals had fallen through, what chaos her absence had created. Instead, she left it where it was. An hour later, Ethan returned to find her still sitting at the table, staring into her now cold coffee. You okay? He asked, hanging up his jacket. I don't know. He poured himself a cup and sat down across from her. Want to talk about it? Not really, but I probably should. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Last night was real, he finished. At least it was for me. It was for me too. That's the problem. Why is that a problem? Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because I've been here a month, Ethan, 1 month, and I'm already attached to you, to Mia, to this life. What happens when reality comes knocking? What reality? The one where I have a company to run, investors who depend on me, employees whose livelihoods are tied to my decisions. She stood and started pacing. I can't just walk away from all of that because I had a nice time baking cookies and skipping rocks. Is that all this is to you? A nice time? No, but it's not real life either. Ethan set down his coffee, his jaw tight. This is my real life. Mia's real life. Just because it doesn't involve boardrooms and seven-figure deals doesn't make it less real. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He stood to face her. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're already planning your exit. I'm trying to be realistic. No, you're trying to protect yourself. His voice was sharp now, cutting. You're scared, so you're looking for reasons to run. Victoria felt anger flare in her chest. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? You've been running your whole life, Victoria. From your parents, from relationships, from anything that might actually make you happy. And now you've got a chance at something real, and you're already looking for the door. That's not fair. Isn't it? Ethan moved closer, and she could see the hurt in his eyes. I'm not asking you to give up everything. I'm asking you to consider that maybe you could have both, but you won't even try because you're too afraid of failing. I'm not afraid. Yes, you are. And you know what? That's okay. I'm afraid too, terrified actually, but I'm willing to try anyway. Victoria felt tears burning her eyes. What if it doesn't work? What if I can't be what you and Mia need? What if you can? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Victoria wanted to believe it could work, wanted to believe she could somehow balance her career with this life, that she could be enough for both worlds. But she'd spent 38 years being one thing. How was she supposed to become another? Before she could respond, Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at it, frowned, then answered. Hello? Yeah, this is he. What? When? His expression shifted, concern replacing anger. I'll be right there. He hung up and grabbed his jacket. That was the school. Mia got into a fight on the playground. A fight, Mia? Apparently she punched another kid. He was already heading for the door. I have to go. I'm coming with you. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just nodded. Fine. Let's go. The drive to the school was tense and silent. Victoria kept replaying their argument in her head, the words he'd thrown at her cutting deeper each time. Was he right? Was she just looking for an excuse to run? At the school, they found Mia sitting in the principal's office, her arms crossed and her face defiant. There was a red mark on her cheek, and her knuckles were scraped. What happened? Ethan asked, kneeling in front of her. Tommy said mean things, Mia said, her voice wavering between anger and tears. The principal, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, sighed. Tommy Marshall said something about Mia's mother, and Mia responded by hitting him. What did he say? Ethan's voice was dangerous. That's between the children. What did he say? Ethan repeated. Mia's lower lip trembled. He said Mom died because she didn't want to be around me anymore, that she got sick on purpose to get away from me. Victoria felt her heart break. She looked at Ethan and saw his hands clenched into fists, saw the barely controlled rage in his eyes. Where's Tommy? He asked. Mr. Carter, I understand you're upset. Where is Tommy? The principal hesitated, then called for Tommy to be brought in. A few minutes later, a boy around Mia's age appeared, his nose bloody and his mother trailing behind him. Your daughter broke my son's nose, the mother shrieked before anyone could speak. Your son told my daughter her mother died to get away from her, Ethan said, his voice deadly calm. The woman's face went red. He's 6 years old. He doesn't know what he's saying. Then maybe you should teach him. Maybe you should teach your daughter not to hit people. Victoria stepped forward before she could stop herself. Maybe if you'd taught your son basic human decency, we wouldn't be here. The woman turned on her. And who are you? Someone who knows a terrible parent when she sees one. How dare you? Enough. The principal stood. Mrs. Marshall, please take Tommy to the nurse. Mr. Carter, Mia is suspended for 3 days. Those are the rules. Fine. Ethan took Mia's hand. We're leaving. They walked out in silence, Mia between them, her small hand gripping Victoria's tightly. In the parking lot, Ethan stopped and pulled Mia into a fierce hug. Listen to me, he said, his voice rough. Tommy is wrong. Your mom didn't leave you. She loved you more than anything in the world, and she fought so hard to stay. You understand? Mia nodded against his chest, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And I'm not mad at you for hitting him. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, but next time, use your words, okay? Okay, Mia whispered. They drove home in silence. Once they were inside, Ethan sent Mia to wash up while he started making lunch. Victoria stood in the doorway, feeling like an intruder. You didn't have to defend us, Ethan said without looking at her. Back there with that woman. I wanted to. Why? Because she was wrong, and you were right to be angry. He turned to face her, and she saw exhaustion in every line of his face. I'm sorry. About earlier. I shouldn't have said those things. You were right, though, about me running. Maybe. But I didn't have to be cruel about it. Victoria moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. I don't want to run, Ethan. I'm just scared that if I stay, I'll ruin everything. That I'll let you down, let Mia down. That I'll prove my parents right about me after all. Right about what? That I'm not capable of real connection. That I'm too cold, too driven, too broken to love anyone properly. Ethan reached out and took her hands, and Victoria felt the warmth of him seep into her bones. You're not broken. You're human. And you're plenty capable of love. I've seen it with Mia. That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you've been more of a mother to her in the past month than most people manage in a lifetime. Victoria felt tears spill down her cheeks. I don't know how to do this. Nobody does. We all just fake it till we make it. She laughed through her tears and Ethan pulled her into a hug. Victoria let herself melt into it, let herself feel safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. I want to try, she whispered against his chest. I don't know how, but I want to try. That's all I'm asking. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, until Mia's voice called from the bathroom, asking if lunch was ready. The next few days were strange and tentative. Mia was home on suspension, which meant the three of them were together constantly. They fell into a rhythm: breakfast, cartoons, lunch, outdoor adventures, dinner, bedtime. It was domestic and normal and terrifying in its simplicity. Victoria found herself thinking about her old life less and less. When she did think about it, it felt distant, like something that had happened to someone else. The meetings, the deals, the constant hustle. It all seemed so pointless now. But she knew she couldn't hide forever. On Mia's last day of suspension, Victoria finally turned on her phone. It took 20 minutes to boot up, and when it did, the notifications came flooding in. Hundreds of emails, dozens of voicemails, text messages from colleagues and investors, and people whose names she barely recognized. She scrolled through them with a growing sense of detachment. There was a time when each of these messages would have sent her into a panic, when she would have dropped everything to respond. Now they just felt like noise. One email caught her attention, though. It was from her assistant, Sarah, dated 2 days ago. "Victoria, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Please call me when you can." Victoria hesitated, then dialed Sarah's number. "Victoria, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "I know. I'm sorry. What's going on?" "What's going on? The board is considering a vote of no confidence. They want to remove you as CEO." Victoria felt her stomach drop. "What? Why?" "Because you've been gone for over a month with no explanation. Because deals are falling apart and investors are getting nervous. Because they think you've abandoned the company." Sarah's voice softened. "What's happening, Victoria? Where are you?" "I'm in Kansas." "Kansas? What are you doing in Kansas?" "Living. For the first time in my life, I'm actually living." There was a long pause. "Are you coming back?" Victoria looked around the kitchen, at the drawings Mia had stuck to the refrigerator, at the coffee mug Ethan had left in the sink that morning. "I don't know." "Victoria, if you don't come back soon, there won't be anything to come back to. The board meets next week. If you're not there to defend yourself, they'll vote you out." "Maybe that's okay." "What? No, it's not okay. This is your company. You built it from nothing. You can't just walk away." "Why not?" Because it's who you are." "Is it?" Victoria asked. "Or is it just what I do?" Sarah was silent for a moment. "I don't understand what's happening to you." "Neither do I, but I think I'm finally figuring out who I want to be." "And that doesn't include the company?" Victoria closed her eyes. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I promise." She hung up before Sarah could argue further, then turned off the phone again. Her hands were shaking, and she felt like she might throw up. "Everything okay?" She turned to find Ethan in the doorway, concern written across his face. "The board wants to remove me as CEO," she said flatly. "I have a week to decide whether I'm going to fight for my company or walk away from everything I've built." Ethan moved closer. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. A month ago, the answer would have been obvious. I'd have been on the first flight back, ready to fight tooth and nail to keep my position." She looked at him. "But now? Now I'm not sure I care." "You should care. It's your life's work." "Is it, though? Or is it just what I did to avoid having a real life?" Ethan sat down at the table, and Victoria joined him. "You want my honest opinion?" he asked. "Always." "I think you need to go back. Not because of the company, but because you need to face it. You need to look at your old life head on and decide if it's really what you want, or if you've been running towards something that was never going to make you happy." "What if I go back and realize I can't leave?" "Then you can't leave, and I'll deal with it." "Just like that?" "No, not just like that. It'll hurt like hell. But I'd rather you go and be sure than stay and always wonder." Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been this smart. You were just too busy being successful to notice." She smiled despite the fear churning in her stomach. "If I go back, I don't know when I'll be able to come back here. The board meeting, the damage control, getting everything back on track. It could take weeks, months even." "I know." "And Mia? We'll understand or she won't, but kids are resilient. I don't want to hurt her." "Then don't make promises you can't keep. Be honest with her. She can handle more than you think." That evening, Victoria sat down with Mia before bed. The little girl was in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. "Can I talk to you about something?" Victoria asked. Mia nodded, suddenly serious. "I have to go back to the city for a little while. There are some things I need to take care of with my work." Mia's face fell. You're leaving? Just for a little while. Not forever. That's what everyone says. And then they don't come back. Victoria felt her heart crack. I'm not like everyone else. How do I know? Because I'm promising you right now that I will come back. I don't know when, but I will. And I never break my promises. Mia studied her face, looking for lies. Do you promise? Promise? I promise, promise. The little girl was quiet for a moment, then climbed into Victoria's lap and buried her face in her shoulder. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you too, sweetheart. So much. They sat like that for a long time, Victoria holding Mia and trying not to cry. When she finally tucked the girl into bed, Mia grabbed her hand. Victoria? Yeah, honey? Are you going to marry my daddy? Victoria froze. What? Emma's mom got married last year, and now Emma has a new daddy. If you marry my daddy, does that mean you'd be my new mommy? Victoria's throat tightened. I don't know, sweetheart. Your dad and I are just friends right now. But you like him, right? And he likes you. I can tell. It's more complicated than that. Why? Because grown-up things usually are. Mia considered this, then nodded. Okay, but if you do marry him, I think that would be good. You make him smile. Victoria bent down and kissed her forehead. Go to sleep, troublemaker. Night, Victoria. Good night, Mia. She closed the door and leaned against it, trying to calm her racing heart. Marriage. She hadn't even let herself think that far ahead. Hell, she and Ethan hadn't even kissed. But Mia saw it, saw the possibility of something more. And that terrified Victoria more than any board meeting ever could. She found Ethan in the barn, working on his truck by the light of a single bulb. He looked up when she entered, wiping his hands on a rag. She okay? He asked. She asked if I was going to marry you. Ethan nearly dropped the wrench he was holding. She what? Apparently she's been thinking about it. Jesus. He set down the tools and leaned against the truck. What did you tell her? That we're just friends. Are we? Victoria looked at him, at this man who'd somehow become her anchor in the storm. I don't know what we are. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment. When are you leaving? Tomorrow morning. I booked a flight out of Wichita. That soon? The board meeting is in 5 days. I need time to prepare. Ethan nodded, but she could see the disappointment in his eyes. You need a ride to the airport? I was going to rent a car. I'll take you. Ethan, you don't have to. I want to. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Let me do this one last thing before you go. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. This isn't goodbye forever. I know. But it feels like it. It's not. I'm coming back. When? I don't know, but I will. Ethan reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. You better, because if you don't, I'm coming after you. Victoria laughed despite the tears now streaming down her face. You wouldn't. Try me. They stood there in the dim light of the barn, the smell of motor oil and hay surrounding them, and Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. She'd spent her whole life running from moments like this, from vulnerability and connection and the terrifying possibility of love. But she wasn't running anymore. She reached up and pulled Ethan down to her, pressing her lips to his. He froze for half a second, surprised, then kissed her back with a hunger that took her breath away. His hands came up to cup her face, and she melted into him, letting herself feel everything she'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. Why didn't you? Because I was waiting for you to be ready. I'm ready now. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, Victoria, I'm all in. I don't do casual. I don't do halfway. She looked into his eyes and saw everything he was offering. Safety, love, a future. Everything she'd never let herself want. I'm sure, she whispered. He kissed her again, slower this time, and Victoria felt herself falling. Not into the river this time, but into something deeper and more terrifying. She was falling in love, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to stop it. They stayed in the barn long after the kiss ended, neither wanting to break the spell. Eventually, the cold drove them inside, where they sat on the couch drinking tea that neither of them really tasted. Ethan's arm was around Victoria's shoulders, and she leaned into him, memorizing the feel of it. "I should pack," she said finally, though she didn't move. "Probably. But I don't want to." "Then don't. Stay here. Forget the board meeting. Forget the company. Just stay." Victoria turned to look at him. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" His eyes were serious. "I'd rather have you here, even if it means you're struggling with the decision, than lose you to a life that's been making you miserable." "It's not that simple." "It could be." She pulled away gently, standing up. "No, it couldn't. Because if I stay without dealing with it, I'll always wonder. I'll always have that hanging over me, and eventually I'll resent you for it. And if you go back and they pull you in, what then? Then I guess we'll find out what we're really made of." Ethan stood too, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I'm tired of tests, Victoria. I'm tired of wondering if people are going to stay or leave. Sarah didn't have a choice, but you do. And you're choosing to walk away." "I'm not walking away. I'm going to handle my responsibilities so I can come back without anything holding me back." "You keep saying that, but what if you get there and realize this was just a break? A nice little vacation from your real life?" Victoria felt anger flare. "Is that really what you think this is to me?" "I don't know what to think anymore." "Well, let me make it clear." She moved closer, her voice shaking with emotion. "This past month has been the realest thing I've experienced in years. You and Mia, you're not a vacation. You're not a break. You're the first thing that's felt like home since I don't know when." "Then why are you leaving?" "Because I need to close that chapter properly. I need to look my old life in the face and choose to walk away from it. Otherwise, I'll always wonder if I gave up too easily." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "And what if you can't walk away?" "Then I guess I'm not the person I thought I was becoming." She went to the guest room and started packing the few things she'd accumulated. Some clothes she'd bought in town, toiletries, a drawing Mia had made of the three of them. Her hands shook as she folded each item, and more than once she had to stop and wipe her eyes. There was a soft knock on the door. "Can I come in?" "Yeah." Ethan entered, holding something in his hands. "Mia wanted you to have this." He held out a bracelet made of colorful beads and string, the kind kids made in art class. "She made it for you, said it's for good luck." Victoria took it with trembling hands. "When did she make this?" "Last week. She's been working on it in secret." He paused. "She really does love you, you know, in her own 6-year-old way." "I love her too, so much it scares me." "Good. Being scared means it matters." Victoria slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. "Ethan, I need you to understand something. When I come back, and I will come back, I need to know you'll still be here. That you won't have decided I'm too much trouble or too complicated or too broken." He moved closer, taking her face in his hands. "Listen to me. I've had my heart broken before. I know what loss feels like. And I'm choosing this anyway. I'm choosing you. Broken parts and all." "Wait?" "Because for the first time since Sarah died, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just surviving. Because Mia laughs more. Because I wake up looking forward to the day instead of dreading it." His thumb brushed away a tear on her cheek. "Because you make everything better, even when you're being difficult." Victoria laughed despite herself. "I'm not difficult. You're impossible, but you're worth it." They kissed again, and this time it felt different, like a promise instead of a question. The drive to the airport the next morning was quiet. Mia sat in the back seat, unusually subdued, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Victoria kept turning around to look at her, memorizing her face. "You're going to come back, right?" Mia asked as they pulled into the airport. "I promise." "But when?" "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but soon." "That's not a real answer." Victoria unbuckled and climbed into the back seat, pulling Mia into a tight hug. "You're right, it's not. But it's the only one I have right now. I have to go fix some things in my old life before I can really be part of your new one." "What if you like your old life better?" "I won't. I already know I won't." "How do you know?" Victoria pulled back and looked into those earnest eyes. "Because my old life didn't have you in it. And now that it does, I can't imagine going back to the way things were." Mia seemed to consider this, then nodded. Okay, but you have to call. Every day. Every day, Victoria agreed. At the security checkpoint, Victoria turned back one last time. Ethan and Mia were still standing there, watching her. Ethan raised a hand in farewell, and Mia waved her rabbit. Victoria waved back, then forced herself to turn and walk through. She didn't let herself cry until she was on the plane. The flight back to Chicago felt surreal. Victoria stared out the window at the clouds, trying to prepare herself for what was coming. She'd left as one person and was returning as someone else entirely. Would anyone notice? Would they care? Sarah was waiting at her apartment when she arrived, having used the spare key Victoria had given her years ago. "You look different," Sarah said, studying her. "I am different. Good different or bad different?" Victoria set down her bag and looked around her apartment, sleek, modern, expensive, and completely devoid of personality. "I don't know yet." Over the next few days, Victoria threw herself into preparation for the board meeting. She reviewed financial reports, analyzed the damage her absence had caused, prepared her defense. But her heart wasn't in it the way it used to be. The numbers that once excited her now felt empty. She called Ethan every night and Mia every morning before school. Hearing their voices was the only thing that kept her grounded. "How's it going?" Ethan asked 3 days before the meeting. "I don't know. I'm preparing the best defense of my career for a position I'm not sure I even want anymore." "Then why are you doing it?" "Because I need to know I'm making the choice, not having it made for me." The night before the board meeting, Victoria couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment, rehearsing her speech, second-guessing every decision. At 2 in the morning, her phone rang. "Did I wake you?" Ethan asked. "I wasn't sleeping." "Me neither. Mia had a nightmare. Took forever to get her back down." "Is she okay?" "She dreamed you weren't coming back." He paused. "Are you?" "Yes, I just need to do this first." "Victoria, can I tell you something?" When Sarah was sick toward the end, she was in so much pain, and I kept thinking that if I could just fix it, just find the right treatment or the right doctor, everything would be okay. But you can't fix some things. Sometimes you just have to let go. Victoria felt her chest tighten. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe you don't need to fix your old life. Maybe you just need to let it go." "It's not that easy." "Isn't it? You built that company from nothing. You can build something new." "But what if I'm not ready?" "Nobody's ever ready. You just do it anyway." They talked for another hour about everything and nothing until Victoria finally felt calm enough to try sleeping. The board meeting started at 9. Victoria arrived early, dressed in her sharpest suit, her armor back in place. But as she sat in the conference room waiting for the others to arrive, she kept touching the beaded bracelet on her wrist, hidden under her sleeve. The board members filed in one by one, 12 people who'd once respected her, now looking at her with varying degrees of suspicion and concern. "Ms. Hale," the chairman began, "thank you for joining us. We've called this meeting to discuss your prolonged absence and its impact on the company." "I understand. Can you explain where you've been for the past 5 weeks?" Victoria took a breath. "I was recovering from a car accident. I nearly died, and I needed time to figure out what I wanted my life to look like moving forward." Murmurs around the table. The chairman leaned forward. "And you couldn't have communicated this to us?" "No, because if I had, you would have pulled me back in before I had a chance to heal. And I would have let you, because that's what I always do. Put the company first. Put everyone else first. Put myself last. That's your job as CEO." "Is it?" Victoria stood, surprising herself. "Is my job to work myself to death? To sacrifice every relationship, every moment of happiness, every chance at a real life for quarterly earnings?" "We're not asking you to sacrifice." "Yes, you are. That's exactly what you're asking. And I've been doing it for 10 years. 10 years of 16-hour days, of canceled vacations, of choosing spreadsheets over human connection. And you know what I have to show for it? Money. I never spend. Success that feels hollow. And a life so empty I drove my car into a river without even realizing I wanted to." The room was silent. Victoria continued, her voice steady. "I built this company because I thought it would prove something. Prove I was smart enough, strong enough, worthy enough. But it didn't. It just made me lonely." "Ms. Hale, if you're resigning—" "I am." The words were out before she'd fully realized she was saying them. Effective immediately. Sarah Chen will make an excellent CEO. She's been doing half my job for the past year anyway, and she actually wants it. The chairman blinked. You're walking away? Just like that? Not just like that. I'm walking towards something. There's a difference. She gathered her things, shook a few hands, and walked out of the conference room. In the elevator, she pulled out her phone and called Ethan. Hey, he answered. How'd it go? I quit. Silence. Then, you what? I quit, resigned, walked away. I'm done. Victoria, are you sure? You don't have to. I'm sure. I'm more sure of this than I've been of anything in my entire life. She was crying now, but she was smiling too. I'm coming home. Home? Yeah, to Kansas, to you and Mia, if you'll have me. She heard him take a shaky breath. When? Tonight. I'm booking a flight right now. Victoria, I love you, she said, the words spilling out. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I love you. And I love Mia, and I want to build a life with you, if you'll let me. Ethan was quiet for so long she thought the call had dropped. Then, I love you too. We both do. Get on that plane. Victoria laughed through her tears. I'm on my way. She spent the rest of the day tying up loose ends, signing paperwork, emptying her office, saying goodbye to colleagues who seemed genuinely shocked by her decision. Sarah cornered her in the hallway. Are you really doing this? Sarah asked. I really am. Because of a man? Because of me, Victoria corrected. Because I finally figured out that success without happiness is just a fancy kind of failure. Sarah studied her for a long moment, then smiled. You do look different, lighter, somehow. I feel lighter, like I've been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there. Are you going to be okay? Financially, I mean? Victoria laughed. I've been saving for years with nothing to spend it on. I'll be fine, better than fine. She caught the last flight out to Wichita, arriving just before midnight. Ethan was waiting at the airport, and when she saw him, she dropped her bags and ran. He caught her, lifting her off her feet, and they held each other like they'd been apart for years instead of days. You really did it, he said against her hair. I really did. Any regrets? Not a single one. They drove back to the house in comfortable silence, Victoria's hand in Ethan's the whole way. The stars were bright overhead, and the Kansas landscape stretched out around them, dark and infinite. Mia's going to lose her mind when she sees you in the morning, Ethan said. I can't wait. Where are you going to stay? The guest room is with you, Victoria interrupted. If that's okay. I'm done with halfway measures. Ethan glanced at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. Yeah, that's more than okay. The next morning, Victoria woke to the sound of Mia's shriek of joy. The little girl had apparently discovered her presence and come running, launching herself onto the bed. You came back! You came back! Daddy said you would, but I didn't really believe it, but you're here! Victoria caught her in a tight hug, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. I promised, didn't I? Are you staying forever? Victoria looked at Ethan, who was standing in the doorway with a cup of coffee and a smile that made her heart skip. Yeah, sweetheart, I think I am. The weeks that followed were an adjustment. Victoria had to learn to live at a slower pace, to find purpose outside of work, to be okay with quiet. It wasn't always easy. There were days she felt restless, days she questioned her decision, days she wondered if she'd made a huge mistake. But then Mia would grab her hand and pull her outside to look at a bug, or Ethan would wrap his arms around her while she was cooking dinner, or she'd wake up to the sound of birdsong instead of traffic, and she'd remember why she'd chosen this. She started consulting remotely, taking on projects that interested her, and turning down ones that didn't. She helped Mia with homework, learned to bake bread that didn't come out like a brick, planted a garden that mostly died but had a few stubborn survivors. She and Ethan fought sometimes about money, about parenting, about whose turn it was to do the dishes. But they always worked through it. 6 months after she'd quit her job, Ethan proposed. It wasn't fancy, just the two of them at the creek where he'd proposed to Sarah, the same place Victoria had learned to skip rocks. He pulled out a simple ring and asked if she'd marry him, and she said yes without hesitation. They got married in the backyard with Mia as the flower girl and half the town in attendance. It was small and chaotic and perfect. During the ceremony, when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Mia raised her hand. "I have something to say," she announced. Ethan looked panicked. "Mia, now's not the time. I just wanted to say that I'm really happy Victoria's going to be my new mom, even though she can't skip rocks very good and burns the cookies sometimes." Everyone laughed, and Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you too, troublemaker." That night, after the guests had left and Mia was asleep, Victoria and Ethan sat on the porch watching the stars. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked, echoing his question from months ago. Victoria thought about her old life, the corner office, the power, the success, thought about everything she'd given up. Then she thought about Mia's laugh, about Ethan's hand in hers, about the garden she was learning to tend and the community she was becoming part of. Thought about waking up happy instead of anxious, about having time to breathe, about mattering to people in a way that had nothing to do with what she could do for them. "Not a single one," she said. A year after the wedding, Victoria was in the kitchen making lunch when Mia burst through the door, home from school with news. "We're doing a project about heroes," she announced. "We have to write about someone who changed our life." "That's great, honey. Who are you going to write about?" "You!" Victoria nearly dropped the knife she was holding. "Me?" "Yeah, because you were really sad and lost, but then you found us and now you're happy." "Mrs. Peterson says that's called a transformation." Victoria knelt down and pulled Mia into a hug, overwhelmed. "I think you and your dad transformed me more than I transformed myself." "Can I tell her that? For my paper?" "You can tell her whatever you want." That night, Victoria stood at the window watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. "Just thinking about how different my life is now." "Good different?" "The best different." She turned in his arms to face him. "You know what's funny? I used to think happiness was something you achieved, something you earned through hard work and sacrifice, but it's not." "What is it?" "It's a choice. It's choosing to be present instead of always reaching for the next thing. It's choosing connection over achievement. It's choosing to be vulnerable even when it's terrifying." She smiled. "It's choosing a life that fits you instead of trying to fit yourself into a life that never really did." "That's very wise." "I'm learning from the best." They stood there together as the light faded, and Victoria felt something she'd never felt before. Contentment. Not the absence of wanting, but the presence of enough. Enough love, enough purpose, enough joy. She thought about this woman she'd been a year and a half ago, driving too fast down country roads, running from everything and toward nothing. That woman had been drowning in her own life, so focused on success that she'd forgotten to live. And then she'd driven into a river, and a single father with a beat-up truck and a 6-year-old daughter had pulled her out. Not just from the water, but from the life that was killing her. She'd lost everything that day. Her car, her illusions, her carefully constructed identity. And in losing it all, she'd found something better. She'd found home. "Hey," Mia called from the living room. "Are we going to have ice cream or what? You promised." Victoria and Ethan exchanged a smile. "Coming," Victoria called back. As they walked toward the living room, toward Mia and ice cream and an ordinary evening in their ordinary life, Victoria felt a profound gratitude wash over her. Not for the big things, though those mattered too, but for the small ones. For sticky fingers and burnt cookies and fights about homework. For morning coffee and goodnight kisses and the sound of Ethan's laugh. For a life that wasn't perfect, but was real. She'd spent years chasing success, thinking it would fill the emptiness inside her. But it turned out the emptiness wasn't something to be filled. It was something to be felt, acknowledged, and then released. It was making room for the things that actually mattered. Later that night, after Mia was asleep and the house was quiet, Victoria found herself standing in the doorway of Mia's room, watching her sleep. The little girl was sprawled across the bed, covers kicked off, rabbit clutched to her chest. "She asked me something today," Ethan said quietly from behind her. "What?" "She asked if you were going to stay forever or if you'd leave like her mom did." Victoria's chest tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that her mom didn't choose to leave, but you chose to stay, and that makes all the difference." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "I did choose this. I keep choosing it every single day." I know, so does she. But kids worry. So do adults. Ethan pulled her close. You know what I think? I think we're all just doing our best with broken pieces. None of us have it figured out. We just keep showing up and hoping that's enough. Is it enough? Yeah, it is. They stood there in the darkness, two imperfect people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way, and Victoria felt the truth of it settle into her bones. This was enough. She was enough. Not because she'd achieved anything or proved anything, but simply because she'd chosen to be present, to be real, to be vulnerable enough to love and be loved in return. The next morning, Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Mia already jumping on the bed. "Daddy's making pancakes," she announced. "The good kind with chocolate chips." Victoria laughed and pulled her down for a hug. "Go tell him I'll be right there." Mia scampered off and Victoria lay there for a moment listening to the sounds of her family in the kitchen. Mia's chatter, Ethan's patient responses, the clatter of pans. Her family. When had they become hers? When had this life become the one she couldn't imagine living without? She thought maybe it had been gradual, like spring turning to summer, imperceptible until suddenly everything was warm and growing and alive. Or maybe it had been all at once, in that moment underwater when she'd thought she was dying and had realized she'd never really lived. Either way, here she was. She got out of bed and caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked different than she had 18 months ago. Older in some ways, younger in others. There were lines around her eyes from smiling, freckles from being outside. A softness that hadn't been there before. She looked happy. She looked like herself. In the kitchen, Ethan was at the stove while Mia set the table, putting forks in all the wrong places. "Need help?" Victoria asked. "We got it," Ethan said, flipping a pancake. "But you can sit and look pretty if you want." "That's sexist." "Fine. Sit and look handsome." Victoria laughed and poured herself coffee, settling at the table. Mia climbed into her lap, even though she was really too big for it now, and Victoria wrapped her arms around her. "Victoria?" Mia said. "Yeah, sweetheart? Are you happy?" It was such a simple question, but it carried the weight of everything. Victoria looked around the small kitchen, at the mismatched dishes, at Ethan burning pancakes at the stove, at the drawings on the refrigerator and the scuffed floors, and the window that looked out over fields that stretched forever. She thought about her old life, about everything she'd given up, the power, the prestige, the proof that she mattered, and she realized she'd never mattered more than she did right now. "Yeah," she said, pressing a kiss to the top of Mia's head. "I'm happy." "Good," Mia said, satisfied. "Me too." They ate breakfast together, the three of them, and made plans for the day ahead. Nothing special, just groceries and homework, and maybe a trip to the creek if the weather held. Just life. Real, messy, imperfect life. And it was more than enough. It was everything.